Hello everyone, welcome to the Revelations and Web Adventures channel. Today, I'm taking you 70 kilometers west of La Paz, the Bolivian capital, to a site called Pumapunku. It's a place located in a slightly larger area called Tiwanaku, situated at an altitude of 3,800 meters, where lie in an absolutely cataclysmic way ancient ruins still unexplained today. In these ruins, we find the most enigmatic megaliths on our planet. The largest of them measure more than 10 meters and weigh nearly 140 tons. Yet this megalithic site seems to have been destroyed like a mere Lego construction. So one might wonder when and how could all this have happened? Academically, officials tell us that this site dates between 500 and 600 of our era. But the two questions we can ask now are, could this site actually be much older? And could this site have been built by peoples, not from Andean America, but who would have come from the other side of the planet? That's what we're going to look at together in this video. Don't move, let's begin. Like all ancient sites, we believe that Pumapunku was created with primitive tools. Yet some suggest that the site would have required the use of much more advanced technologies in order to work its granite and andesite blocks. But do we have any evidence? Tests have been conducted to compare the original sizes with modern sizes using diamond and laser. When I talk about size, I'm not referring to measurements, but rather the type of cut. The difference between original and modern sizes is noticeable. One could speculate that the antique aspect resembles our modern diamond cut, which would then have experienced erosion. But considering the properties of the andesite, it is more likely that we are facing another technology that we do not yet know, or that we simply no longer know. A technology that would have allowed the design of the mysterious axe-shaped blocks. The theory of advanced technologies initially rested on the mass production of these axe-shaped blocks. A bit like a factory, but it's not, because each block is unique, which further complicates their assembly. And what about this hole? Cutting-edge technology or soft copper? Indeed, the hole that perforates this block follows a curved path, but maintains the same diameter throughout the perforation. Here too, we seem to be facing a modern realization, a fine groove in which holes are drilled at regular intervals. If it is possible to drill with copper for cores a little wider than those found elsewhere in the world, one wonders how these mini holes were drilled. If we follow the official logic, it would have been extremely difficult to create such thin copper tubes in order to apply the same type of perforation and coring that we can see elsewhere in the world. But even if that were the case, how could we have turned these mini copper tubes? Is it so absurd to consider other more advanced methods? Regarding the methods used, there is also the plot, which is raised by the transport of blocks that were extracted from a quarry more than 100 kilometers away. The official theory says they were painstakingly pulled on wooden logs, tree trunks. The issue is that we are currently at an altitude of 3,874 yards, and that in the central Cordillera there is no vegetation that grows at this altitude. At this altitude, there are no more trees. There is only what we call the paramo, which is this tundra of the high plateaus, but there are no trees. No trees means no trunk. No trunk means no transport. No transport means no stones. No stones means no construction. No construction means no palace. No palace. No palace. Always with the necessary caution, we gradually approach the hypothesis of advanced technologies, or in any case, unknown technologies. But what is certain is that academically accepted theories do not stand up to field experience. If this technology has indeed emerged, when did it appear? Academics accept the fact that Tiwanaku, and therefore Pumapunku, were abruptly abandoned around the year 1100 of our era. So we are dealing with a pre-Inca people. The Incas would then have inherited the Pumapunku site and used it for rites related to the stars and the gods of the sky. From there would have stemmed Tiwanaku, whose construction characteristics are quite different from those of Pumapunku. Tiwanaku would have been this pilgrimage site for the Andean peoples to pay tribute to their distant past, from which Pumapunku stems. The excavations at Tiwanaku took place for the most part in the 60s. A few feet underground, a temple was revealed in which we find hundreds of faces. What is surprising is that all these faces correspond to very different ethnic characteristics. Legend has it that all human ethnicities are represented here. But if that is the case, how did the Andean people know about the existence of other tribes at a time when great sailors and explorers were not aware of Tiwanaku or Pumapunku? This diversity could be evidence that the site dates from a time when people on Earth were either distributed heterogeneously across the globe or were capable of moving planetarily. Another representation that will confirm this is the statue of what is called the Sun Temple. Academics say it represents Viracocha, this civilizing figure of the region, like Osiris in Egypt, for example. Yet, upon closer inspection, it seems to have a rather thick beard. A surprising characteristic given that Andean peoples or American Indians do not have the hair system that allows for large beards. The heads I mentioned earlier are carved into the original rock, preserving its natural color. On the other hand, two heads have been colored or decolored white, representing a face that would make more than one fantasize. Their resemblance to what some call the Little Greys is quite striking. So myth or reality? And to come back to the bearded statue, the planetary aspect of ancient peoples would seem to indicate that the Sumerians themselves would have visited this region several millennia before our era. To support this, one must go to La Paz, Bolivia. In the Metal Museum, there is an absolutely unique artifact discovered by a local farmer on the shores of Lake Titicaca. On this artifact, we find Sumerian writings. How to explain this obvious link between not only two peoples, but especially two places so far apart at a time when the pharaohs were just being born? And what about the technologies used? Supporters of ancient astronaut theories see there the intervention of an extraterrestrial people. Who would have come to give us the benefit of a technology without which we could not have accomplished? Works like Pumapunku, Machu Picchu, Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, or even the pyramids of Egypt. However, I prefer to stay a little more down to earth. In this down-to-earth approach, we can rely on oral tradition. From local people who speak of a very ancient people, much older than the peoples that date from our era. And who would have moved these megaliths? They would have made them fly and transport through the air. To the sound of a trumpet, these are the terms that are used. When we hear this, what can it mean, the sound of a trumpet? We can make a link with what we find in Egypt, because there too, oral traditions speak a lot about sounds, frequencies, and vibrations that were used to put in place all these mysterious constructions. From there, we can wonder, were the ancient builders the real ones, not those who date from our era in a much more remote way? Could they have had access to a technology allowing transport through sound and vibration? This would give us a valid reason to think that oral tradition is not just talking about delirium in relation to sounds, trumpets, I don't know what, but simply report and transmit to us. Millennia, perhaps tens of millennia later, the knowledge of a highly advanced technique that is unknown to us today. In any case, the ancient world seemed much more developed than today. We would like to believe it. Without necessarily considering vibrations as the engine of the technologies used, we must face the facts. Pumapunku features cuts in the Onzasai, the rock used there, with a precision that could only be achieved today using highly sophisticated technologies. Chris Dunn, mentioned in prior videos, is a gentleman relentless in understanding the technical aspects of ancient constructions. He also tackled the measurement of the axe-shaped blocks found at Pumapunku. He then reproduced them at 1/8 scale to try to understand what appears to be a giant Lego mechanism. He immediately noticed that the walls of the cavities in the blocks were not parallel, and they have what are called dovetails. Usually dovetails are cut so that elements fit together easily and securely. He took the experiment a step further, even making the missing elements. According to him, we could be facing a kind of locking system, as you can see in these images. However, the question that needs to be asked, if that were the case, where are the missing pieces, the axe-shaped blocks? I know that Pumapunku is a completely decimated area that was discovered entirely buried under a meter of Earth, but we should have at least found one element of these locking systems, don't you think? And what if there was something still hidden under the meter that has already been dug up? Archaeologists say there's no need to dig deeper, as there's nothing below what has already been excavated. But how can one be so sure without at least trying? An alternative Bolivian researcher named Antonio Portugal used ground-penetrating radar in 2011 and was able to detect large underground cavities. This clearly shows that there is still something beneath what has already been cleared away. And what's beneath might perhaps allow us to go a little further in the search for the constituent elements of the original Pumapunku. However, it's very unfortunate that the Bolivian government doesn't seem inclined to deepen the excavations at Pumapunku. Regardless, with its 10,000 square meters of surface, which is very small, Pumapunku remains one of the most mysterious sites, but one of the most revealing. That would allow us to project back to a time when a population had technical and technological skills that we are still unable to suspect today, with a civilizational context that we find today in our modern era. That is to say, a people spread across the scale of the planet, precisely able to move on a planetary scale in order to share techniques and knowledge. This could begin to slightly explain the fact that we find very strong similarities on either side of the planet, in places that share only one characteristic, their mysterious aspect. Well friends, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video on Pumapunku. If so, don't hesitate to give a thumbs up or leave comments. Also feel free to subscribe. If it's the first time you've come across the channel, don't hesitate to go watch the other videos if you're regulars. As usual, I thank you for your loyalty. I thank you for watching the video to the end. And me, in the meantime, I'm going to get back to work to make you other nice videos. I'll see you soon for more revelations and adventures. Bye!